Roberts tries to rise above it, at least
he
publicly.
Does. Well, exactly.
And he's
but
got
does
that scrubbed.
But does he? That is the great whodunit of our time. Is he a stealth?
Is he a stealth Scalia?
Welcome to NewsBeast. Tina Brown in the house with Paul Callan, CNN legal contributor. Good to see you at NewsBeast.
Nice to be with you, John.
So, Supreme Court coming down with almost all their major findings yesterday. The decisions involving the Arizona illegal immigration law, juvenile life sentencing. Of course, we've got healthcare coming down on Thursday. That's the main event. But what were your big takeaways about the way the Arizona law went down?
It's been a fascinating week with the Supreme Court, with all of these big decisions coming down. On the Arizona case, we saw how the court is splitting on a question of national importance that's coming up in the presidential campaign. Chief Justice Roberts, who of course is a conservative, had part of the majority decision, but he was joined by other liberals on the court. And of course, then on the conservative side, we had the usual Scalia and Thomas coalition in opposition. The question is, does it give us a hint about what's going to be coming up on health care? Hard to say. They were talking about federal power, basically, and they were saying where the federal government regulates immigration, the states really don't have a right to interfere. And how is that going to play out with health care? How will they look at state versus federal rights in health care? That's the only little hint that may come out.
Do you think that maybe was a tell philosophically?
Yeah, I think it is a philosophical tell, because I think obviously the court, even with this ideological split, has a rather firm decision that there are certain federal functions that are reserved to the federal government. The question is, with health care, is it legitimately a federal function under the Commerce Clause, or is it reserved to the states and to individuals?
Tina, did you think that they left a big loophole on this one? They basically said, well, the one, show me your papers provision, we'll have to see how that plays out to see if it's ultimately racial profiling.
Do you think that there's going to be any surprise on that?
Well, exactly. I just think the numbers aren't going to look good at the end of the day. Yeah.
I'm absolutely fascinated though by the impending health fair.
Sure.
Because the fact that Justice Roberts is writing it is just so interesting in a way, because he's such a kind of scrubbed antiseptic figure. He plays his cards so close to his vest. Yep. Actually, he turned out to be in a huge kind of Trojan horse as far as from the point of view of the liberals, in the sense that there was that moment when he was being confirmed when it just felt like there was this huge kind of cultural, peer, political pressure for everyone to say, but of course he's completely the right guy to do this. But actually, of course, he's turned out to be far more Republican in his own, way of looking at the world than I think people realized at the time.
No, this is the Roberts court, and it'll be fascinating to see, the way he doesn't want to have major decisions come down 5-4. I don't see any way around this. It'll be fascinating to see if he's able to create a larger majority for, banning the individual mandate, but then what that does politically and practically.
Well, I think people who don't follow the court closely, and really only lawyers do, and only a handful, the appellate lawyers, follow this stuff, but there's this whole personality thing going on behind the scenes as they go from chamber to chamber to discuss these things. And starting with Roberts, he's very focused on his leadership role as the Chief Justice of the United States. And I think you see him trying to cobble together coalitions, and he will join one of those coalitions to provide leadership to the court to demonstrate, at least in his own, he's trying to say he's not really an ideologue. We know Scalia is an ideologue.
Sure.
That's clear cut. But Roberts tries to rise above it, at least publicly.
Well, exactly.
And he's
but
got that scrubbed.
Does he? That is the great whodunit of our time. It's like, does he?
Yeah, or is he the stealth? Is he
a stealth?
Is he a stealth Scalia? Yeah, we got alliteration in that too. Yeah, I think he is a stealth Scalia.
I agree.
I'm beginning to think he is too.
Yeah.
And we'll soon see.
Yes, most definitely. And
but he's clever about putting together the coalition, and he finds his point, and he's not always with Scalia, and he's not always at the edges of the ideology. He's sort of center right as opposed to way right. And
the great question, though, is, if it goes down, healthcare from Obama's point of view, wouldn't it have been better to go down with the public option than to go down with this kind of compromised thing anyway, which always got him his own base's wrath?
Well,
Do you think it'll galvanize his, the younger voters, for instance, who have already been completely uninterested in this whole process throughout?
I do think there's a case to be made that if this is defeated by the Supreme Court, whoever loses, their base will be more energized. Remember, he couldn't get public option passed. I mean, this was the best they could do, even with Democratic majorities in both houses. You couldn't have been more narrow. The problem is, I mean, if the court strikes this down, which is originally a Republican idea, of course, advanced by the Heritage Foundation, what this does practically as well as politically, in terms of just all of a sudden costs are going to spike, because this was the cost mechanism, and already polls are showing that people don't like the bill, but they like the provisions,
Right.
and they say Obama should go back to the drawing board. But you're not going to be dealing with more reasonable Republicans on this issue. It is
Well,
so
no, it's
hard.
also become such a hugely unstable, destabilizing factor in business life. I mean, the amount of business people that I talk
Uncertainty.
to who say they have no idea what this is going to do to their company's bottom line.
I have to
That's
tell you,
right.
I was out in
It's really a
California.
problem.
I was out in California earlier in the week on a case with a group of, I will say, very conservative lawyers who have some large law firms out there. And a couple of them talking about a single payer system, saying basically, it's so catastrophic, the costs. I mean, people are paying more for health care premiums for people working in the file room than they are for salaries. And at some point, the system breaks, and
Yeah.
you finally throw up your hands and say, let the government run it. Let somebody else run it.
Yeah.
The private sector approach simply is not working.
Well, look, here's what we know. No matter what the court decides, healthcare is going to continue to be a problem with an aging population. This is high stakes week on the high court. Exciting times. It's all for us at NewsBeast. We'll be talking more about this on Thursday.